going to admit that I do often keep frozen puff pastry in my freezer, but there's also times when I want to make it completely from scratch. And I actually have an easy recipe for homemade puff pastry. It's a quick, easy puff pastry, not a traditional puff pastry, but the results are almost the same. It's called Easy Puff Pastry or Blitz Puff Pastry, but it replaces this. There's nothing wrong with buying the frozen puff pastry. It's quick, easy, and the results are really great. But there's also a huge list of ingredients here. The recipe that I'm going to use today just uses flour, butter, salt, and ice water. This recipe is on my blog, and it's a recipe I make often. It's perfect during the holidays. You can also make this ahead of time, store in the refrigerator for a few days, or even in the freezer. On the blog, I make it in a stand mixer, but today I'm going to show you how to make it in a bowl. The process is almost exactly the same. We're going to start with 2 cups of flour, and I'm going to fluff and scoop my flour into my measuring cup and then level it off. And we need 1/2 teaspoon of salt and butter. I use just regular salted butter for this. And we need 1 cup, and we're going to start by cutting this into small cubes. So I like to cut it into thirds, rotate it over, cut it into thirds again, and then you get these little cubes that are just the perfect size that we need. We're going to smoosh our butter into our flour. So first I'm just going to give this a light toss so that everything's covered and break apart these little pieces of butter that I just cut up. And then I'm going to put everything over onto one side, and I'm going to start with 2 pieces of butter between my fingers, and I'm literally just going to smoosh them into the flour. And then I continue on. All right, we're ready to add our water. And we're going to use some very cold water. It's important that everything that we use here is cold. I start with just room temperature flour, cold butter, and then ice water. And I'm going to use 1/2 cup of ice water. I like to start by drizzling about half of it in here and then just giving it a toss. And then adding the other half. You can see it's starting to come together. And then I'm going to just start to form this into kind of a ball. It's going to feel really dry, but that's okay. It's going to come together. You have lots of butter in here that's really going to make everything stick together. Okay, this goes out onto the counter. Right now, it doesn't look like much of anything. Okay, I've got this big mess, and just start to knead it together. We're not going to knead it for very long, just enough to bring everything together. That dough all came together. I'm going to get a little more flour, and we're going to begin rolling. So I'm going to add a little bit, just a very light amount, to my counter because I don't want it to keep sticking. A little bit on my rolling pin. And I'm going to start rolling this out into a rectangle that's an 8 by 12. When I'm rolling pastry, I always like to start in the center and go out, back to the center and go down. And you're going to want to use your hands to straighten those sides. Working with the long side in this direction, I'm now going to start my folds. And this is really the piece that makes this puff pastry so flaky. So we're going to fold. I always start on the left side, and then you take this side and fold it over. And that is our first fold. Now I'm going to add a little bit more flour to the counter. And we're going to do this again. I'm going to start in the center and pull down and up. I'm going to fold again. And I'm going to do this one more time. Every time we're folding, we're creating more layers. Fold. All right, now what we need to do is this is going to go into a plastic bag, and it's going to go in the refrigerator for at least 4 hours before we use it in the recipe. But that is it. And then this is used in any recipe that calls for puff pastry. So I have several on the blog. I'll link to several so that you can see some of the recipes that you can make with either store-bought puff pastry or your own homemade, quick and easy puff pastry.